Hi there, my name's Antony Sammeroff. I'm a relationship coach and a communication trainer, and this is a response to a request to do a video on dealing with people when they're being unreasonable, or indeed not dealing with them, as may often be the most appropriate response. But we're going to explore some options so that you have more choices when you're trying to deal with difficult people in your life. First of all, I guess we better define what we mean by unreasonable. And when I say unreasonable, what I mean is people who are expressing themselves through cognitive distortions, which means, so far as you can see it, they're not seeing reality as it is. They're jumping to conclusions or overgeneralizing, or they're mind reading, which is when you assume you know other people's motives and why people are doing this and that, when you don't have the information to make that conclusion. It's kind of like if you want to know how much money's in your wallet, thinking about it instead of opening up the wallet and checking. Another one that can be really frustrating is when people fortune tell. They start saying what's going to happen, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and usually it's a catastrophization of the future, and no matter what you say or what evidence you present them with, they're certain that their interpretation of the future is true. And the really funny thing is, with people who fortune tell, I find they tend to do it a lot, and no matter how many times their predictions have not come true, they seem to insist on continuing to predict the future. Another one is emotional reasoning, and that's when you assume that because you feel a certain state, there is something corresponding to that state happening in the world. So say you feel anxious and therefore you assume you're under threat, even though you might not be. It could just be a childhood trigger. And the thing that's really frustrating about dealing with anxious people is if you're not making them less anxious, they tend to want everyone around them to be as anxious as they are. And because anxiety is a kind of ego defense, they can actually trigger you in all sorts of ingenious ways that if they sat down to plan out, they wouldn't even be intelligent enough to dream them up. You know, if you think people are good at annoying you on purpose, wait till you see how good they are at annoying you unconsciously. Now, I tend to think that when people are being unreasonable, it usually is emotional reasoning. And particularly if someone's in a heightened emotional state, their capacity to reason is actually biologically diminished because they're not thinking with the part of their brain that is used to reason. They're using a more primitive part of their brain. So here's what not to say to someone who is being unreasonable. You're being unreasonable. You're wrong. That's illogical. That's crazy. Bullshit. Or any variation of the above. But why not? Well, what's going to happen is you're going to get drawn into a debate about whether what they say is actually reasonable or not. And it is not reasonable to argue with an unreasonable person. It's not logical to argue with an illogical person, so don't do it. Otherwise, you're being unreasonable yourself. I'm reminded of a quote by the famous science fiction author Robert Heinlein. He said, "Never try to teach a pig to sing. It's a waste of time and it annoys the hell out of the pig." The other thing I strongly suggest you avoid doing is using adjectives to describe them. So don't say you're being selfish or you're an idiot or you're crazy, because even if it's true, it's not going to help you get your point across. It's only going to raise the tension, and what's most likely to do is divert from resolving the conflict or getting you out of the situation to a debate on whether the adjective is true or not. And you don't really want to be caught in a situation where you're having a debate with an unreasonable person on whether or not they're selfish, because that's just not going to lead anywhere good. Let's talk about what you can actually do. One thing that you can try doing is to just point out what they're feeling. So you can say, I can tell you're anxious, or I can tell you're getting frustrated. This is part of trying to shift the conversation from whether what they're saying is true or not, to dealing with the emotions that are blocking the situation from being dealt with. It's even possible in some cases, if you get very good at dealing with other people's emotions, that you can put them down and get them to a place where they're more open to reason. Can't promise you're always going to be able to do it, but it's certainly a possibility. Two more options if you want to stay in the situation is one, just to say, that's interesting, why do you believe that? Right, and and just keep on going, getting them to speak till they're done, because sometimes they're actually trying to get that contradiction from you so that they can feed into it and raise the tension and tension. And if all you do is just question them to expand on their view, there's no real way to go there. If they're trying to create a conflict, they might either run out of steam or they might actually see the error in their own reasoning. A third way is just to listen reflectively without agreeing. The more unreasonable someone's being, the harder this is to do, because you want to say, this is crazy what you're saying. But you can practice with people in low pressure situations. So when you're around people in day-to-day life and they're telling you a view that you might disagree with, even if the tension isn't there, you can say, so if I get you right, you don't think people should vote Democrat because they'll raise your taxes? And they'll go, yeah, and blah, 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 blah. And you say, right. And you just continue to reflect their views in your own words until they're absolutely certain that you understand where they're coming from. And they might actually kind of quiet up and cock their head to the side and look at you expectingly, wanting you to respond. And you can see what happens when you respond. Do they actually display more interest in your views now that they've been adequately understood, or do they simply revert back to being completely irrational as soon as you express your own views, which is a good indication that it's maybe time to leave the situation. If you've shown someone that you understand where they're coming from, you've empathized with their emotions, you've even listened reflectively without contradicting them, and they still won't see any reason on the issue, it's probably about time that you got out of the situation. So options for doing that. Well, one option is obviously to say you don't feel like talking about it anymore. Another option is to say, well, why don't you get in touch with me once you've calmed down and had a chance to think about it? And a third option is to simply state your views and say that if they don't agree with you, it looks like you've reached an impasse and you might as well talk about something else. A fourth option with safe people is to say, look, I'm feeling a bit frustrated with this conversation, or upset, or annoyed, or angry, or whatever it is, and I want to go, or I want to talk about something else. There's also the option of moving the conversation from whether what the person is saying is realistic or not to how you're feeling about it, and deal with your feelings, possibly deal with their feelings, and retool and finish the discussion another time. At the end of the day, you can't turn unreasonable people into reasonable ones, and if people are perpetually unreasonable, you might want to consider spending less time with them or reassessing the merit of having them in your life, particularly if they keep on starting arguments and creating conflicts. Remember, at the end of the day, there comes a point when tolerating people's damaging behaviour becomes bad to them as well as you, because you're essentially rewarding them for acting in antisocial ways which are damaging to others. Choosing to exclude people from your social circle might sound harsh, but at the end of the day, it might be the kick in the ass that they need to start treating other people in their lives better, taking their views seriously, and engaging in proper discussions, rather than just insisting that they're right when they have their latest crazy theory. Thanks very much for checking out my video. Please share it with anyone that you know who's interested in philosophy, psychology, or social science, or improving their relationships. If you've got a question you'd like me to cover in another video, let me know in a comment. If you want some detailed personal advice on how you can approach the conflicts in your own life with a higher degree of success, I am available for consultations. I can help you improve your communication and social skills, and I can even mediate if you've got a partner for peace, as I've got some considerable experience doing that. Thanks for checking out my video. Hit the subscribe button and I'll see you next time.